Hello everyone, it's Dylan from Yu-Gi-Oh! Everything, and welcome back to another Appreciating Yu-Gi-Oh! Video. This is the podcast that I do with my friend Rarity Fangirl, and we dive into one of the elements of Yu-Gi-Oh! On the, of course, anime or manga side. Now, we are going to be doing this for all of the shows. I'm sure there's some people asking, yeah, when are you getting to GX? When are you getting to 5Ds? Patience. We are going to get to everything, I promise, but there still are a lot of things from the original series that we need to cover. And so episode 5, this episode is going to be dedicated to the spin-off manga Yugioh R. And funny enough, I've been doing this channel for close to 10 years. I have never done a single video on Yugioh R, so this is going to be a first for the channel. I'm very excited to discuss it, and I'll let my partner introduce themselves real quick. Rarity Fangirl, she does some amazing work over on her channel. I'll have everything linked. How are you doing today, Rarity?
I'm doing very well. Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to talk about Yugioh R. Not only do I think it's a great piece of Yu-Gi-Oh! Media, you guys know I love my spin-off mangas, that is kind of my jam, but it's also really cool because this is just like most of pretty much all the spin-off manga. This was not done by Kazuki Takahashi, but was done by one of his assistants.
Right.
Akira Ito, who some of you in my card fighters over in the audience, if you're a dual Yu-Gi-Oh! Card fight fan like me, he was one of the people behind Cardfight Vanguard. He did Yu-Gi-Oh! R from 2004 to 2008, and then Vanguard came around late 2010, 2011. So this was actually his first full work. Of course, he was an assistant with Takahashi, but assistant's work in an official manga is really hard to spot because the manga kind of does the corrections. So it's really, really difficult, but he was an assistant. I'm not sure his history of when he started working with Takahashi, but I know he worked on it, I think, at least since Battle City, if I remember, but don't quote me on that. Information about when assistants come on and come off isn't always available. And sometimes they're not even credited for a work, and that's, like, really, really sad because I think I talked about this during the original manga video. Manga is a lot of work, especially back in the day when everything was by hand. All those screen tone was put by hand and cut out from, like, pieces of paper. It's insane. So please appreciate your mangakas. Just appreciate the work that they do. Like we always say, appreciate our animators, our voice actors, our composers, our editors, everything. But yeah, so I'm excited to talk about that in terms of his work and what I've learned from his work in Vanguard and how it this was preluding to it and what his kind of storytelling style is compared to Takahashi, and kind of see where they overlap and where some things are different.
Yeah, absolutely. No, very well said there. And yeah, I mean, that is the crux of it, right? I mean, Takahashi is sure credited on like the Yu-Gi-Oh! R, publication, but only an original concept. I mean, Kazuki Takahashi did not have, I don't believe, anything to do with the writing of this story. And for those of you that might not know, this is a spin-off manga that is supposed to be kind of canon to the original manga. It takes place after the events of Battle City and before Egypt, because remember, in the original manga, there was no Doma, there was no darts, there was no Kaiba Corp Grand Prix. The manga went from Battle City right to, ancient Egypt and the Millennium World. So that's kind of where this manga and this story takes place. And it needs to take place here because the driving element of this story is Pegasus's protege, someone that was taken in by Pegasus very early on in his life, Yako Tenma. He's like the main villain, the main adversary of the story. He's trying to avenge the death of Pegasus, and of course in the manga Pegasus is murdered by Yami Bakura, whereas in the anime he was not. So again, you do have your different timelines here, and I do just need to clarify for those that might not be familiar, this is supposed to take place in the manga verse. It is not supposed to take place in the anime verse. And you have characters as well like Bandit Keith, who returns and has a rematch against Joey. You have the Wicked Gods. That's probably what this manga is most famous for, the Wicked Gods, which are supposed to be, the three evil gods that rival Slifer, Ra, and Obelisk, the three Egyptian gods. And all in all, I mean, I've always really enjoyed the story of Yu-Gi-Oh! R. I do feel like it kind of starts pretty slow. There's a lot of one-off throwaway duelists, and not too many of them are very memorable. But I do feel like when the Kaiba brothers finally show up, things start to really ramp up in terms of storyline, in terms of concept, in terms of the duels. There are some like funny early duels. I mean, one of my favorites is when Yugi is just walking around and sees this like old lady, and it turns out that she's like a duelist, and after she loses, she's like, man, I can't wait to tell my grandchildren about this. And that, just seeing like an old lady duel the king of games, there's something hilarious about that. Joey duels a girl who like isn't like a very good duelist and is very shy, and I always thought there was going to be some twist with this character, but there wasn't. That's literally her entire gimmick. And after Joey beats her, they're like, okay, where's the key for the next like area? Because basically Yako Tenma kidnaps Anzu, is going to try to resurrect Pegasus by using Anzu as a vessel. He's taken over the Kaiba Corp building, and Yugi and friends are trying to go through the Kaiba Corp building in order to get to Yako Tenma and to save Anzu, and really to prevent the revival of Pegasus. And we know that that's possible because they revived Bandit Keith, which, we'll talk about that a little later on. And so all the sections are kind of locked off, and very early on, Joey and Tristan get separated from Yugi because, of course, and Joey, beats this girl and is like, all right, where's the key to the next area? And the girl's just like, oh, there is actually no key. Like, this is a dead end. I was just here to waste your time. And they get super pissed at it. So there are some early moments that are pretty enjoyable. But once you learn about Yako, his younger twin brother, Gecko, excuse me, that's when things really start to kind of ramp up. The Kaiba brothers show up. But all in all, seeing the Wicked Gods, seeing some original characters, seeing Bandit Keith brought back, and actually at one point, I felt bad for Bandit Keith when he was about to lose to Joey, and he's talking about how he doesn't want to get dragged back down to hell and death, and has a really human moment, which is very rare for Bandit Keith, the gambling, obnoxious American character that's in the show. But I really did genuinely feel for him, and I thought that was something that the manga did really, really well, kind of make me feel for characters that I previously never thought I would feel sympathy for. But, when the evil gods, because Bandit Keith used one of the three wicked gods, when they are being used, they basically are taking over that person, and they kind of are controlling that person, which is a gimmick we've seen in Yu-Gi-Oh! Plenty of times, being overtaken by the strength of, evil cards. Eventually, of course, Yako Tenma is defeated, and that's where the manga ends. All in all, I've always enjoyed the story of Yugioh R. I wish it was adopted into an anime. I understand why it wasn't. It was written pretty much after Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters ended. It was definitely written after the manga ended, and it didn't end until a few months before 5Ds started airing. So this really was being done during the GX anime's runtime, and at that point you can't really go back and make the spin-off anime. I mean, I guess they could have. They obviously chose not to. But this is one that I always would have loved to see animated. So without, continuously rambling on, I mean, Rarity, what were your just kind of thoughts on the Yu-Gi-Oh! R manga?
To not repeat what you've said, I very much agree. I really think the beginning is kind of slow, but I do really like Yako's introduction, where he's using Kaiba's solid vision to phase through the school like a ghost.
Yep.
Any character that uses the solid vision system is super, super cool. We have these cool holograms and magic. I love it when characters use that. I still don't understand fully how he kidnapped Anzu. I guess you could say it was the wicked gods just took her off the building. And they didn't really explain that too much. It just kind of is a thing. But that's of Yu-Gi-Oh, right? Always those unanswered questions of little details. You're just like, wait, what? That's a Yu-Gi-Oh staple at this point. But I think that Yu-Gi-Oh R is, as I've said, it's a really cool work. Not only in terms of everything Dylan said, but again about Akira Ito as a mangaka. And this was his first work, as I said before. And for his first work, I think it's a beautiful work of art. And people still know Ito in Japan as the Yu-Gi-Oh! R guy. And of course the Vanguard guy. But they always still reference that. And he looks back on his time with Takahashi very fondly. They were very good friends. And I know that I remember reading his tweet when Takahashi passed away. And I wanted to cry. They were... it's kind of funny because they worked together, then they were kind of competitors, even though, Takahashi was kind of, not really working on Yu-Gi-Oh! Actively, but he did come in sometimes for character design or consultation, I'm sure. but kind of like made new art out of his Yu-Gi-Oh time. And Akira Ito definitely took his experience working on Yu-Gi-Oh into Vanguard. Like, if you guys know, if you've read the Vanguard manga, which Akira Ito illustrated, you can see a lot of similarities both in his paneling, but also in character design. Like, Yako Tenma is very similar vibes to my man, Ren Suzugamori. Very similar, both striving for perfection, trying to almost impress a father figure, even though Ren's father was abusive. And one really cool thing that Akira Ito does is he really loves to have the main character and the antagonists kind of be dark reflections of each other. This is not a wild Yu-Gi-Oh idea. The most recent example I can think of is like Zuijo and Udius, right? They were both people who were very similar about, you know, trying to fight for their homeland, but they went about it in a different way, right? At the beginning in season 1 of Go Rush. So I think that they kind of had that where Yako felt basically like his brother Gecko was always like overshadowing him, and he kind of equates this with Yugi and Atem, which is something that the fandom brings up all the time. It was really interesting for them to address how Yugi feels that Atem, you know, is the one that's known as the King of Games. He's the one mostly fighting, and you see like what we think of at first is a representation of Yugi's anger with the Fiend Sanctuary token. That is like the coolest, rawest thing I think they've done in a manga in a long time. That was raw as heck. It was so beautiful. And Atem, like, when basically Yako says, your partner hates you, he's like, what, he hates me? And then Yugi's like, nah, bro, I don't hate him. And then he has this heartfelt speech about how his how Atem, you know, opened up. And that this is a representation of your hatred, not mine. Oh yeah, little Yugi gets a duel and actually a win in this, too. Yeah, he gets a win.
A duel where the opponent really just wanted to face Atem. Atem comes out, tells the opponent off, and then gives it back to Yugi.
Yeah.
That was honestly really, really cool. I actually loved that moment.
It was so good. I think Ito, he's a character, he's really more focused, I think, on a lot more character drama, which is why you might think in the beginning where not every single turn of the duel was drawn out for those early duels. If you've read the Vanguard manga, his early fights are very similar to that, where he's more focusing on key moments. So that's not unusual for him, and it's interesting he kind of started that here. But I think it's fine. Like, if they're just, like, minor duels, like, one-off chapters of these cool characters, I think not having the entire duel shown is perfectly fine. It helps with the pace of reading, and it kind of, you get to touch on that. I also did love the grandma, and I loved the girl with Joey. Those are the two I was actually going to bring up, so I love that we thought the same of who the memorable one-offs were. But yeah, once the Kaiba brothers have their dramatical entrance coming in, my boys coming in to do some business.
Yes.
I love that, which makes sense. It is their tower. And what's really sad is Kaiba has that outfit, that new outfit. He shows for like 4 pages. It's the outfit, his little new Kaiba Brothers outfit is really, really cool. And I wish he wore that again. I've seen a lot of good fan art of that particular outfit. You know what I'm talking about, Dylan, with like the white, with the Kaiba Corp logo.
Yes, I do.
Sleeve.
Yep.
And he drew a design for Mokuba too, which wasn't in the manga, but it was in the extra art at the end of each chapter. Like, come on. The Kaiba Bros matching outfits. 10 out of 10 manga, best manga ever. Just kidding. The Arc 5 manga.
Rarity does love her Kaiba Brothers.
I do. It's my thing. But yeah, I really enjoyed this story, and I think one of my favorite things is the callbacks. His sense of continuity is amazing. Bringing back Time Machine from Bandit Keith, and he got mad, like, hey, that's my card, bro. And Joe was like, well, you dropped it. You left it. I mean, I just grabbed it. That was beautiful. It's also funny because Time Machine is now a thing in Yu-Gi-Oh! Go Rush. That's really funny seeing these old cards kind of come back into play. Really, really funny. Also, when Kaiba loses to Yako and kind of gets, you could argue, a penalty game-ish by the Wicked Gods, you see him kind of have like a similar like freak out moment to his first nightmare penalty game against Atem with like, but it's the blue eyes. Super amazing imagery. Akira Ito is always great on imagery as well. That was so powerful, and the way that it's framed also reminds me of when Mokuba had his penalty game in the Death Tea arc. Very similar position as well. So cool kind of callback there. And speaking of my boy Kaiba, again, I will not gush about Kaiba too much, but I really do like how when he lost, he was saying, like, this is, like, the place, like, he's like, I'm trying to rebuild himself, because this is after Battle City, when he's, like, gone towards his dream. It's like he's experienced that character development a little bit, right? And, of course, we don't get to see the fruition of Kaiba Land in the manga because DSOD happens, and you could argue about Kaiba's character there, but it's really cool that he was like, he says all of these hopes being swallowed up by the evil gods, hoping about his dream about beating Yugi, beating Item, right? It was so powerful, and I felt bad for him. I mean, I always feel bad for Kaiba, but yeah. And if you're a Joey fan, you're in a treat, because Joey doesn't lose a single duel in this entire arc. He just sweeps everybody. And it's awesome if you were a Joey Wheeler fan and wanted to see a post-Battle City Joey actually perform well. Because I'm not a fan of how he went out in the KC Grand Tournament. I think we talked about during the DM video. His loss to Siegfried, because he kind of just lost how to duel for a little bit, making some bad misplays. But I think he did really, really well here. And I guess like the only other thing, major thing, is the artwork. Of course, this is, as I said, Akira Ito was one of Takahashi's assistants, of course. And you can tell which panels he reused from the original manga and which ones he drew. I think he captured Takahashi's style pretty well. He's a little bit more angular, especially in the noses. He likes to add like a lot of screen tone. He likes to add a lot of sketching and some blushes everywhere. That's just kind of his style. And I still think it translates pretty well. It's very much, again, like Yu-Gi-Oh! And I think the original characters are very well designed. Yako and Gekko kind of look like Kiru a little bit. As I mentioned to Dylan before we started recording, he looks a little bit like Kiru. Very similar. I wonder if that was a purposeful recycle or that was just a coincidence. I think a lot of the dual professors, some of the bigger, like the more, the top one with the spiky hair, I forget what his name was. I think he fought Yako at the end, like one of the top dual card professors.
Yeah, it may have been Richie.
Yeah, I think you might be right, but don't count me on that. There's a lot of characters and a lot of names.
There is.
And I think that was just, they're really well designed, and I think that they all just fit into the Yu-Gi-Oh! Universe well, and expanding upon Pegasus, beautiful idea for a story. Like, Pegasus's death actually meaning something. Like, what happened to the company? And by the way, according to the Yu-Gi-Oh! Wiki, apparently the name Tenma, their last name, alludes to Pegasus's Japanese alias in Rashif of Destruction, which is one of the video games.
Oh, interesting. That's very interesting.
Yeah, it's because he was called Tenma, his alias in that game. He went by Tenma, so that's really cool. I don't know. I'm pretty sure that may have been an intentional Easter egg. I'm not totally sure. They came out around the same time, so maybe. But I say it counts. I'll count it as an Easter egg. So, did you know that this is a reference?
That'll be a did you know coming up. Don't worry.
Yeah, did you know? Yeah, there you go. And in terms of the card play, all the original cards, I think from Yugioh R, pretty much all of them have been printed at this point. We got like Green Baboon was debuted in this. Green Baboon's really cool. The Wicked Gods, of course. What is it? The Beast King Barbaros, the one with the spear, that card. Like some of these like iconic cards that that were kind of in that later GX era make their debut in the manga and were printed. Which, as you guys know, I do love it when manga cards do get printed as well. So that was really cool to see. And again, he draws monsters just as beautiful as Takahashi. Some of the sketch art on the Wicked Gods, like when he's attacking Kaiba especially, the line art, absolutely beautiful. And overall, really, really cool stuff. And yeah, it's a really, really fun read, and I highly recommend you guys read it, especially if you guys are manga lovers. If you're not a big fan of Doma, which I told you guys during Appreciating Yu-Gi-Oh! I was not. Like, if I had to say which of the two arcs I would rather have in the anime, I think the KC Grand Prix is fine. I think it's fun. I think that's perfectly fine. I would prefer Yu-Gi-Oh! R. I would take Yu-Gi-Oh! R over Doma any day. That's just me.
Yeah,
though.
I mean, I'll go a step further. I don't know if you'd agree with me on this, because I know you do have a special place in your heart for the virtual world. I would act, and I like Doma more than you do. I would have preferred Yu-Gi-Oh! R over any of the spin-off anime arcs that we got. I think, as you said too, adding like the depth to Pegasus's story. I mean, again, the big issue though is it wouldn't have made sense with the anime that we got, because Pegasus's death and Bandit Keith's death, for that matter, are portrayed totally differently between the manga verse and the anime verse, and those are actually two big events you can look at when confirming that they are two separate timelines, because there's no way that it's the same timeline, because in one Pegasus dies and one he doesn't. It's the same with Keith. In the manga he dies and in the anime he doesn't. And I remember a while ago, I was having a discussion with someone and they were like, well, they could have just said like Pegasus was in a coma and then done the arc and he would have been in a coma. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? I honestly don't think that would have worked, because I think the reason that Yako had so much anger towards Yugi and so much desperation and went to such extreme lengths is because Pegasus was dead. And I think if he was in a coma, and you always have a chance to come out of a coma, I don't know if the motivation would have made as much sense to go as far as he did. And then, of course, Bandit Keith being the test vessel that confirmed to them that, hey, it's possible to do this. I mean, I guess you could have said, yeah, he died after that warehouse duel, that he had. That was an anime-only duel in the warehouse with Yugi to start, like, the Battle City arc. I mean, I guess you could have written that, but now you're really kind of like changing things just to make it work. Whereas Yu-Gi-Oh! R from the manga perspective just makes so much more sense because of the deaths to those two characters. So that being said, though, a lot of people say, man, I wish the anime followed the manga a little more like wholeheartedly. Well, if it did, I would have much rather seen Yu-Gi-Oh! R than any of the other filler arcs we got. And honestly, like, if we did get Yu-Gi-Oh! R and a Duel Monsters anime that followed the manga more closely, which is something we talked about when we discussed the original manga. I said I think it's the best piece of Yu-Gi-Oh! Media that exists, the original Duel Monsters manga, or the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga. I think if you added Yu-Gi-Oh! R into the anime, I think the Duel Monsters anime as a whole would be viewed a lot more favorable, honestly, even comparing to all the other Yu-Gi-Oh! Shows. I think it would be near the top of my list, to be honest with you. I don't know if you agree with that, Rarity. I don't know if you would take it over Virtual World. I mean, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I mean, I do love my Virtual World, as you guys know. I'm a big Noah Kaiba defender because I love Kaiba Brothers, but I do think that, again, a Yu-Gi-Oh! R in a manga accurate adaptation, I think would be perfect. I think that works. And you basically hit on the reasons why it doesn't work. But I really love that they came in and took those two major character deaths of, like, two of the bigger characters in Yu-Gi-Oh! That have perma-died in the manga and, like, making a story out of it. Expanding upon Pegasus, taking in these duelists. Kaiba even knew Yako, and, like, who took over Industrial Illusions after Pegasus died? We have an answer, right?
Right.
We have an answer. It's like, which we know that Industrial Illusions, some people theorize that Kaiba bought them out, or at least bought the Duel Monsters IP for them by Dark Side Dimensions. That's an entirely different question about the timeline. And some people consider Yu-Gi-Oh! R canon to the manga, some don't. I consider it canon. I don't think it contradicts anything that came after, and I think Ito was very careful in his continuity nods, which is something that he does really, real well as a writer, of bringing in those little bits of continuity, which we as readers always love to see, because as much as I love Takahashi, I think there were some times where there were some continuity mistakes or things that in characterization, I think some people think Kaiba's characterization sometimes can be wonky, of like, at one point he's accepting help, at other times he's not. It's like a little wonky, though he is a complicated guy. And I also think this story also talks about just utilizing characters. Like, Tristan got to do some stuff. Mokuba was being Hacker Boy, my boy, coming in there. They used Kaiba very well. And obviously he knows the building, right? So he got up to the top pretty fast. It is his building. And again, Joey doing some of the minor characters and having Gecko team up with Yugi in a Tem, I thought was great. And even though Anzu was kidnapped, we haven't talked about her, for most of this story, the sadness you feel of her just being a spirit in a card, unable to be with her friends, and I think she says that it feels lonely, just got me in this way. And it kind of reminds me of other characters who were spirits, who were once regular people. Obviously, we think about the U-Boys, right? Especially in the manga, right? You all know my manga U-Boys, my babies. Them is a big one I always think of. But also, like, characters, like, you could say Astro before he came physical as well, Atem, of course, but just being stuck inside a card, it makes me wonder if, because in Yu-Gi-Oh! R, right, when they played Teia's Soul Prison on the Dual Disc, right, and she got to have a semi-physical form, right, I was like, would that work with the carded characters in Arc 5? Would that work? That's a theory video for another day. Would it work on the carded characters? Because it's similar logic, right? You trap their soul in a card, then you put it on the Dual Disc. I'm sure Reiji would have, if that was possible, Reiji would have figured that out, or the writers, I guess, just weren't really keen on figuring that out later on. But the fact they were able to take their soul out of their body, and they talked about how a duelist soul is in their deck. We always talk about that, like Kaiba always calls, again, Blue Eyes his soul, right? the embodiment of his spirit, even though we also know like Kasara is definitely a Faber in there as well. And they took that concept and made it real. And I love that part of a duelist is in their physical deck, and that they could extract. That's how they got Bandit Keith to come back. It was in his cards. It's such a cool idea that I don't think Yu-Gi-Oh! Is really touched on again. I don't think so. Like, actually a part of a duelist is in their cards. Which I think that could be a cool idea for a show all by itself as a premise. And whatnot. I just really, really loved that storytelling.
Yeah, no, Yu-Gi-Oh! R, overall just did a really good job from the storytelling perspective. Like, I totally agree with you there. And there were a lot of concepts that we've almost like never seen before, right? Like being trapped in a card and being able to still communicate with Anzu by putting it on the duel desk. Like, that's something that like we didn't see, unless I'm forgetting something, in the Duel Monsters anime or, the original manga. It's certainly something we did not see, as you said, in Arc 5. So, there's other, like, new concepts here. But I also do believe this is within canon of the original manga. I don't think the continuity is messed. This is not a Pyramid of Light situation. Like,
no.
There's nothing in this story that, like, screws with the continuity. And, there are, like, just a lot of really cool moments. Like, the three wicked gods, obviously you think that, Yako has all of them, and even Kaiba, he loses. Of course, Kaiba does what he does best, shows up, acts cool, loses the important duel, and Yugi's got to win it. No shade there to the Kaiba fans, but, I mean, come on. So, in that duel, Kaiba's like, where's the third card? And Yako's like, oh, you don't need to worry about that. And I was like, man, Yako is saying that because he doesn't need the third card to beat Kaiba. That's like how weak he views Kaiba and how much stronger he views these like wicked gods. And then in the very next duel, like Bandit Keith ends up using the third wicked god. And I'm like, whoa, that was a twist like I genuinely did not see coming.
Same.
And Bandit Keith was, of course, driven to fight and defeat Joey. Same way Yako was driven to fight and defeat Yugi. And of course, I got to also just bring this up. I think it's incredible that Yami Bakura kills Pegasus in cold blood, and he's not even mentioned once, right? Nobody mentions him. Nobody says, oh, it was actually this guy that killed you. You know what I mean? That killed Pegasus. Basically what happened is Bandit Keith was resurrected, told Yako that Yugi was the one who killed Pegasus, and that started Yako on his journey. But Keith said that because he just wanted to get at Joey, and he knew that would give him the best chance to get revenge on Joey as well. So that's how, for those that may not have read, how Yako ended up going after Yugi. But I mean, Bakura gets off scot-free. It's crazy.
It is. It's really funny, but as I was trying to say, to be fair, nobody saw it happen. They tried to say that they didn't do it, but nobody saw it, which is like, did Pegasus not have security cameras in
I figured
in the
he had a
duel ring?
camera,
Because they were in the duel ring in the manga. In the anime, they were in Pegasus' like bedroom, which I could kind of believe there's no cameras. How was there no cameras when Pegasus was spying on everybody throughout the entire tournament, was not in his duel arena, and nobody looked at the footage and just saw him murdered in cold blood? Did they just find him there? Like, or like, did like the system not have the data that was used in the card? Like, that's one of the big mysteries. Like, how did nobody figure out it was Bakura, right? And whatnot. I think that's really funny, but yeah, he just doesn't get mentioned, even though he's the catalyst. I guess he was off preparing for the final arc at this point. I guess he was just getting his dressing room ready. He was getting ready to be big bad at the end. Right. Of course.
You're absolutely right. And you can't. And you know what? You really can't mention him, because if you do, then Yako, like, it wouldn't make sense for Yako to then not go after him the same way he went after Yugi. And then, like, I think probably, Akira probably didn't want to bring in more characters than necessary to tell this story. So I think it made sense. Like, I'm not complaining about it. I just found it hilarious that nobody ever figured out that it was Bakura.
I think that's very funny. But I think you're definitely right. And Akira Ito, again, is a mangaka in terms of his other works. He very much likes to utilize characters for certain purposes, but kind of consolidate characters together and not have too many. Like, for example, in Vanguard, there's 4 main characters, but in the manga, one of them, Kamui, doesn't really do anything. It's just Misaki, Kai, and Aichi that kind of do most of the stuff in the manga. Kamui got a lot more due to the anime, but in the manga, he didn't do as much. They kind of just consolidated it down to the people he was thinking were most important. And another thing, I think some Akira Ito fans who love Vanguard, because Akira Ito is very much known for writing really, really cool, competent, badass female characters. Vanguard is very well known for that. And this manga doesn't really have that, which is, again, something that is kind of weird when you look at his later work. That could be something he developed later on, maybe after working on Yu-Gi-Oh! He was kind of just like, man, I should have included more female characters. So maybe that was something he learned through this. And I really would love to know the history and the production behind Yu-Gi-Oh! R. Like, how did the idea come up? Did he propose it? Was he approached by Shonen Jump? Right? Like, that's what I want to know. Is like, how did this all came to be? Because it's just kind of a mystery. None of my sources have looked at it. If you guys have any sources as to Yu-Gi-Oh! R's history, please leave it in the comments, because we would love to read it, because I want to know. I love looking at production history, and I would love to know how this came to be. But yeah, the Wicked Gods are awesome, and I think it's just an overall really, really good read. It's only 45, I think it's 45 chapters.
44,
yeah. 45,
44.
so it's about the same length as the Arc 5 manga, just about. So if you could read that, you could read the Yu-Gi-Oh! R. It took me probably a few hours to reread it. And it's a really fun time, and if you were always hoping that you could see Kaiba and Joey duel again after Battle City when you read the manga, well, here's your chance. They get to come in and do some really cool stuff, especially if you're a Joey fan. If you're a Joey fan, you need to read this, because he gets such good spotlight as well.
Yeah.
So, any closing thoughts, Dylan, about Yu-Gi-Oh! R before we wrap up?
No, I mean, I think we definitely touched on a lot of stuff. I mean, it's certainly worth the read just to talk about how long it is. Yeah, I mean, you know, I've had people kind of say to me before, like, Yu-Gi-Oh! R is like a really short spin-off. I'm like, I mean, I guess it's short compared to like some manga, but compared to like Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga, it's really not that short. And I mean, that's, you know, you get a lot of like length and a lot of substance reading this. I mean, you know, we already said this was 44 chapters. Arc 5 manga is 45 chapters. The Zexal manga is 55. GX and 5Ds are 64 and 66 respectively. So, you know, the spin-off mangas, we always joke that they, you know, got shorter and shorter as they went on. And then, of course, Vrains was 0. And then, you know, this one, though, really is about the same length as the entire Arc 5 manga. And it's only, you know, maybe one volume less than the Zexal manga. So there is a lot of substance here. It's cool. If you like the original Yu-Gi-Oh!, whether you like the manga or whether you like the anime, I would highly recommend that you read this if you haven't already, because you'll feel like you're reading a new spin-off arc that you've never witnessed before with new characters. And it is a lot of fun. I'm a big fan of Yu-Gi-Oh! R. And yeah, I mean, those are really my thoughts. I would just, I would definitely recommend it. Of all the spin-off stuff we got in the Duel Monsters era, you know, I'm talking Pyramid of Light, I'm talking, you know, Capsule Monsters. Yu-Gi-Oh! R to me is like the shining light on the top of the Christmas tree. I think it's probably the best spin-off thing we got from the original show.
Well said, Dylan. Well said. I very much agree. I really love the Christmas reference because we are around the holiday season. And
that's right. I'm in the spirit.
It's perfect. I love it. So, yeah, perfectly agree. If you are a fan of Yu-Gi-Oh! Mangas, if you're a fan of seeing more characters, fan of the Wicked Gods as cards, just really cool fan of Yu-Gi-Oh! Storytelling in general. And I always tell this when we talk about the mangas, please read them. Like, all of them. We're going to hear that because when we get to all the other spin-off mangas, which we're going to get to them, don't worry. In the Arc 5 manga video, I will try not to make 3 hours. I promise. But
we'll do our best.
We'll do our best because I will probably ramble about that one, because that's a most significance for me and Dylan as friends. But I think that Yu-Gi-Oh! R is just a beautiful piece of work, and I'm very thankful for Akira Ito getting the opportunity to do Yu-Gi-Oh! R. I really do believe his work on Yu-Gi-Oh! R is what allowed him to get that notoriety and that experience to further then and create Cardfight Vanguard, which is one of my favorite media in general, right up there with Yu-Gi-Oh! So I'm very thankful to Yu-Gi-Oh! R for that as well. And again, it's a great read. Really, really fun, great art, and my favorite moment for sure, again, is that moment with the Yugi standing up to Yako and being all like, hey, my friends are important to me, and I gained a lot. It's a nice moment for Yugi. So if also you're a Yugimoto fan, there's some really good Yugi moments in this as well. Highly recommend.
some good Yugi moments and good attempt moment and good Joey. Like everyone
Everybody.
from the original, and I think we touched on it very briefly too, because it wasn't Takahashi writing it, but Akira did such a good job, I thought. Nobody felt out of character. You know, we said that to each other before we started recording. Nobody felt out of character. And so, yeah, you feel like you're still watching the same characters from the original show and manga, and I think that's important to reiterate as well. But yeah, guys, want to thank you for watching episode 5 of the Appreciating Yu-Gi-Oh! Podcast. You guys have been amazing. The feedback's been awesome. The next one we're going to do is going to be, we might do like a kind of a spin-off episode in December, but in January we are going to do Season 0, and then we are going to get into Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, and eventually, of course, the other shows as well. I will have Rarity's channel linked down below if she wants to do any promotion. This is the time where she can. And Rarity, once again, thank you as always for joining me for this podcast.
No, thank you. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be talking with you and talking to all of your community. You guys are so loving and so thankful. I very much appreciate when you guys talk to me, also when I pop up in Dylan's streams now and again. So very much thank you guys. In terms of what's coming up in the Rarity channel, I have some things cooking. Can't talk about too much. The big Arc-Fight project is still in the works. Probably going to be more of a next year thing. I hope to have an update video sometime in December, kind of talking about what the fandom crew and I are working on and some other cool things. But we have things back in store for you. As I've talked about many times, being a PhD student is really, really hard. But I'm glad that I still can make the time to work on things solely in the background. And of course, collab with Dylan, the amazing Yu-Gi-Oh! Everything, who is always a pleasure to work with. So thank you guys all for the support, and I can't wait to read what you guys hear about Yu-Gi-Oh! R in the comments. I'm really excited. And I hope everybody has a good Thanksgiving holiday, or if this is before or after, if you celebrate, hope you guys had a good holiday. And we'll see you guys in the spin-off episode when that's going to be really cool. And then Season 0 next year.
Yes, next year. Crazy. Well, Rarity, thank you as always. Thank you all so much for watching. Please leave your thoughts down below in the comments on Yu-Gi-Oh! R. Would love to hear your thoughts and really anything you have to say about that spin-off manga down below. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you have an amazing day. Take care, guys.